Welcome. Have you ever had a data pipeline just silently fail, and you only find out hours or maybe even days later? Well, in this explainer, we're going to walk through exactly how to prevent that with the Great Expectations Python library. You'll see how you can start validating your data in just minutes, right inside your code.
Okay, let's really dig into this idea, because it's the core of everything. At its heart, Great Expectations is all about this one powerful concept. See, an expectation isn't just another data test. It's a clear, human-readable declaration about what your data are supposed to look like. It's a rule that anyone on your team, technical or not, can look at and understand.
So here's our game plan. We're going to go on a quick 5-part journey. We'll start with why you even need to trust your data, then get our environment all set up, connect to some data, write our very first check, and finally, see the payoff. Let's get started.
So, why does this matter so much? Well, think about it. Our modern data systems are incredibly powerful, but they can also be super fragile. Data formats change when you're not looking, pipelines drift, and just one single bad value can wreck a machine learning model or make a critical report totally wrong. GX gives you the tools to build a safety net, so you can catch these problems right where they start.
All right, let's get you set up. Getting your environment ready is actually incredibly straightforward. It really just boils down to 2 key steps to get you up and running.
First, of course, we're going to install the GX core library itself. And second, we'll create this thing called a data context, which you can think of as the main entry point for everything we're about to do with GX.
You know, the best part is that the installation is just one single simple command. If you've ever installed a Python library with pip before, this is going to look very, very familiar. You just run pip install Great Expectations, and that's it. The library's ready to go.
Now, this next concept, the data context, this is key. You should really think of it as the project headquarters for all your data quality work. It's the place where GX keeps everything organized, all your connections to data, your suites of saved expectations, and every validation result you've ever run.
And you've got 2 flavors of this data context. For quick, temporary stuff, like if you're just exploring in a notebook, you can use an ephemeral context. It just lives in memory and vanishes when you're done. But when you want to save and reuse your work, you use a file context. For this guide, we're just going to stick with the default, which is the simple ephemeral one.
Okay, now for the really fun part, connecting to some actual data. To make this feel real, we're going to use a sample of New York City taxi data that will load right into a pandas data frame.
This code should look pretty familiar to anybody who's worked with data in Python. We're just importing our libraries, then we initialize our project headquarters with gx.getContext. And since we didn't give it any special configuration, we get that simple, in-memory, ephemeral context. And finally, we just use pandas to read our sample CSV into a data frame. Standard stuff.
Next, we need to register our data with the context. It helps to think of it like a filing system. First, we add a pandas data source. That's kind of like creating a big drawer and labeling it pandas data frames. Then, inside that drawer, we add a data frame asset and name it taxi data. That's the specific file folder for this particular data frame.
All right, finally, we have to tell GX exactly what data we want to validate. We call that a batch. You know, in the real world, you might validate a whole table, or maybe just today's data, or the latest file that got dropped in a folder. For our example, though, we're keeping it super simple. We're just creating a batch that points to our entire data frame.
Okay, our data is all wired up, so now we can translate a real piece of business logic into our very first expectation. For our taxi data, we know there's a pretty simple rule about how many passengers can physically fit in a cab.
And this is where the magic happens. I mean, just look at how clear and readable that code is. We're not writing a bunch of loops or complicated if statements. We are simply declaring our expectation. We expect the values in the passenger count column to always be between 1 and 6. It's as much documentation as it is a test. It's so cool. All right, this is the moment of truth. We've defined our data, and we've stated our expectation. Now let's actually run that check against our batch of data and see what the results look like. And you know what? To actually trigger the validation, it's just a single method call. You take the batch of data we defined, you call the .validate method on it, and you just pass in the expectation we just created. It's that direct.
The result object we get back is basically a report card for our data. The most important thing here is success true. It tells us that it checked all 10,000 rows in our data and it found 0 violations. Our passenger count is exactly what we expected it to be. Perfect.
And really, that's the whole point. In just a few lines of code, we've programmatically verified a real business rule against thousands of records. This isn't just about finding bad data.
It's about building provable, actual trust in the data that you depend on.
Now, we just used a local pandas data frame, but that's just the beginning. GX has fantastic support for pretty much any SQL backend you can think of. PostgreSQL, Snowflake, BigQuery, you name it. You just install the right dependencies, and the exact same simple patterns we just used apply directly to billions of rows sitting in your data warehouse.
So there you have it. You now have the fundamental pattern to connect to your data, write a really clear human-readable expectation, and get a simple pass or fail result. The real power, of course, comes when you start applying this to the business rules that matter most in your own projects. So, what's the first thing you're going to check?